Hi everyone, and welcome to this tutorial video. In this video I'm going to be showing you how I draw a wing, and this can be based on maybe a bird's wing or an angel wing, that kind of thing. For this tutorial I used a mechanical pencil with HB leads on smooth Bristol board paper. I also used a blending stick and a small eraser. You don't have to worry about the materials. I recommend maybe an HB or a 2B pencil and any drawing paper, and if you don't have a blending stick then it's fine to just blend with your finger. To start off, I added some fine outlines to get the basic shape of the wing, starting off with the shoulder and working upwards, thinking about the bone structure of the wing. For this example, the wing curves upwards from the shoulder and then reaches the final joint, and from that final joint it curves downwards and outwards. I wanted the final feathers at the end of the wing to curve inwards and in the opposite direction, and so I've added a few of the larger feathers, just changing direction and kind of overlapping. And it's a good way of making the drawing seem 3D, especially when I add some shading to it later on. And then once I finished adding the shape to the top of the wing and getting that kind of outline ready, I started adding the outlines of the feathers, the layers of feathers on the inside of the wing. They're definitely the most important part of this when you want the wing to look realistic. When you start adding some shading and get the layered effect, it's really effective. So I continued to add the layers of feathers inside the wing, and then I added a row of large feathers at the bottom of the drawing. These feathers are much stronger and much larger, and in this example when I add the shading I'm going to make these feathers a lot lighter to kind of show the difference between the feathers and show the different kind of layers. Once I finished adding the basic outlines, it was time to move on to the shading. The shading in this drawing has three main parts: the top level, and then the inside feathers, and then the main feathers. So start off with the top, and these feathers are much smaller. They're almost like fur. They're those really fluffy feathers that you see on a bird. So I use the methods that I use for fur or hair, where I start off with fine strokes and then use the blending stick or my finger to blend across, and then use the eraser to add some extra kind of fine hairs in between. I wanted to keep these feathers on top very light, so they don't require much detail at all, and I just added some hairs along the top to kind of define the shape and help with some of the detailing. I added some darker lines of shading along the bottom of this section to also help with defining the shape. Just underneath the top part of the wing, I added another section of these fine feathers. This part required a little bit more shading, and so I used my hair or fur kind of methods for this as well, just using the blending stick and just smoothing out the shading. Once I shaded that part, I added some extra feathers in the background just to help with the realism, and then I added the details to the feathers at the end of the wing, just adding some darker outlines and then adding some smooth shading with the blending stick. Once I added all of the details to the outside edges of this drawing, it was time to focus on the feathers on the inside of the wing. This is the second part, and this is where the shading comes in really important for creating that layered effect. For each feather, I started off by adding some basic shading, and then using the blending stick over the top of that. I then added the central line to each feather, and then I added the extra detailing to make it seem like a feather. That detailing is basically adding the lines to show the texture of the feather, and then adding some dark outlines around the outside of the feather to make it to create the shape. You'll see this process happening as I work my way across the inside of the wing. I'll zoom in so you can see as closely as possible. You'll notice how important it is to add some darker shading around the outside of the feathers, especially when they're overlapping other feathers. This is an amazing way of showing the layered effect, and it works out really well. I highly recommend trying it out. It's a lot of fun, especially when you start to see the process working. With the inside feathers drawn, it was time to move on to the large outer feathers. These are the strong main feathers of the wing, and they will build the structure of the wing and create the shape overall. To add detail to each one of these feathers, I started off by adding some dark outlines, focusing on the shape of a feather. Maybe some edges are missing, maybe there's a little bit of damage to some of the feathers. This all really helps with the realism. So I started off with the outlines, and then I used the blending stick over the top of that to add some shading to one edge, and then I used the eraser to add some highlighting. Once that was done, I then added some fine lines in the direction that you'd expect on a feather. These fine lines really help to add the texture and make it seem like that feathered effect. It's important to make sure you have the lines going in the right direction. It's really important to make sure the feathers don't all look exactly the same. That's why I mentioned adding the damage and making sure they have all these kind of rough edges. It's a really effective way of adding some realism to this drawing. And you'll notice as I work my way across the main feathers, I'm adding some shading where the inside feathers overlap them. This darker shading is hugely important as well. This is another part that really helps add that layering effect. Shading is definitely the most important part when it comes to adding depth to a drawing. And having the contrast between these dark shaded inside feathers and the lighter main outside feathers, it really helps. Contrast in shading and focusing on the shading and highlights really helps with a drawing like this. And then once I finished drawing the main feathers, I just refined a couple of details, making sure to add the texture to the feathers, adding some fine feathers along the top and defining the shape along there, and adding some extra highlights with the eraser, that kind of stuff. Once that was done, the drawing was completed. I really hope this video helped in some way, and if you work on anything similar, then feel free to show me your work on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram. If you enjoy drawing videos, or if you want to learn more about how to draw, then feel free to subscribe to this channel, and any likes or shares on this video are hugely appreciated, and it really means a lot to me. If you want to follow me on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram and follow along with the progress photos throughout the week, then be sure to check out the links in the description box below. And once again, thank you so much for the support on this channel. I really hope this video helped out. It was a lot of fun to work on, and if you have any drawing suggestions, then please let me know. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll see you all soon.